Anyway, I sat down and I said hello. And of course, your mum was sitting there with the boys and she looked at me. She said, "Oh, so how's Bill doing?" And instead of what I may have rehearsed in my mind, how to approach it and say, "Oh, yeah, he's fine, he's resting," I looked at, just burst out crying and said, "He didn't know who I was." Well, if there was any way I could have killed my mother-in-law, that would have been the way to do it. I saw the devastation in her face, and not to mention the boys, because they were in there. I was so caught up in my own emotion, fear that I had felt, even though I was trying so hard to calm myself down before I go into the house, it didn't work.
This is Recovery After Stroke with Bill Gasiamis, helping you go from where you are to where you'd rather be.
Bill from recoveryafterstroke.com. This is episode 100, and my guest today is the one and only Christine Gasiamis. Christine is my ever-suffering better half, and I changed her life as well as mine quite dramatically when in February of 2012, I was diagnosed with the first of 3 bleeds on the brain due to a ruptured arteriovenous malformation. This is a great milestone episode for me and the podcast, because as you will hear in the episode, we've had to overcome so much heartache to get to this point. And now that we are beyond the 8-year mark post-stroke and almost 6 years beyond surgery, there's been so much growth and personal development. And I hope that our story will give you hope and inspire you, and that no matter what, you can get through and overcome a lot of what you're going through and come out on the other side. Now, recently, I have also put everything that I learned about my recovery in the last 8 years into a course called 10 Steps to Brain Health for Stroke Survivors, and Module 1 is now available at recoveryafterstroke.com. This course is included as part of my Recovery After Stroke coaching program, and it will help you overcome fatigue, reduce anxiety, and help support your memory, amongst other things. This 10-step program has been created to complement any medical interventions and works in conjunction with any other physical therapies that you are undergoing. It's a course that you can take from your own home, so you don't have to go anywhere to participate. You only have to log in from your computer. If you're a stroke survivor that wants to know how to heal your brain, overcome fatigue, and reduce anxiety, this course is for you. If you feel like there is not enough support after you leave the hospital and you're afraid that your recovery will go backwards, then this is where I can help. While you are participating in this course, I will coach you and help you gain clarity on where you are currently in your recovery journey. I will help you create a picture of where you would like to be in your recovery 12 months from now, and I will coach you to overcome what's stopping you from getting to your goal. Right now, for everyone that is interested in learning what Recovery After Stroke coaching is all about, you will get access for 7 days totally free. So take advantage of the 7-day free trial now by clicking the link below if you are watching on YouTube, or by going to recoveryafterstroke.com/coaching if you are listening online. And now it's on with the show. Christine Gasiamis, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
How weird is it, me interviewing you while you're in our kitchen and I'm in the study?
Very weird.
Hey, every interview starts with me asking the stroke survivor basically to tell me what happened to them. But because you're not a stroke survivor, thank God, I'm going to ask by asking you what happened to me in your own words. Like, can you give a bit of a sense of what it was like for you leading up to me actually being diagnosed that there was a bleed in my brain?
Okay. So that will be at the beginning when you're experiencing numbness in your left foot, which that week, at the beginning of that week, you really weren't very vocal about what you were experiencing to me. It was only a few days into it, when you were having appointments with the chiropractor, that I realised that you were having a bit of an issue. But it was not until the Friday of that week when you came, I think you had come back from an appointment from the chiropractor, and you came to me and you said that the chiropractor suggested you go straight to emergency because he believed that the problem was not your back. It was only at that moment when I actually watched you walk around the kitchen that I realized that you were dragging your leg. And I asked you, I said, Bill, why are you dragging your leg? And you said, no, I'm not. It was pretty obvious that you were dragging that leg. But anyway, I did encourage you to go. I said, well, go to the hospital. They'll check you out and you'll be, sent home, whatever it may be. But you were complaining that you had a big job the next day. And you're pretty adamant you weren't too interested in the hospital. But anyway, I did encourage you to go and you did listen for once. But I also, what pushed me to do it is I didn't feel right about it. I didn't feel right watching you. Dragging your leg was not more the issue, it was the fact that you did not realise that there was a problem. That set alarm bells for me. And of course, I had to go to Dr. Google, and the worst possible thing to do is go on to Google and search numbness and sore left foot and dragging of the leg and all of that, and he came up with all kinds of not so good things. Anyway, so I dropped you off, I believe, at the hospital, and I came home back to the boys. And that was the beginning of this story, I guess.
It sure was. Though, you know how people talk about Dr. Google, and it's a bad thing. For a lot of doctors don't want us to go there. But in your case, you do tend to go there for every complaint that every one of your family members has. But in this case, it actually wasn't a bad thing, was it?
No, it wasn't. If anything, it just confirmed in my mind not to ignore it, not to listen to you, and say, no, I'm going to work tomorrow. It just set it in my mind that I had to take you, I had to convince you to go. And it worked. And obviously it wasn't most of the things that I had read. And I don't even think stroke was one of them that I read, to be quite honest with you. It was more tumours of the spine, tumours of all kinds of things, that I'm thinking of tumours the whole way. But it turned out to be, a bleed, and that was not what I read. But sure enough, it was enough to convince you to go.
Yeah. So how good was I at being deceiving when you contacted me at about 9:30 or 10 p.m. at night after you had come home? You were with the boys, and I said to you, go home, go with the boys. They're going to take forever. And I said to you, it's probably nothing. And then you spoke to me, and I think by then I had known the results. But again, I lied to you anyway. I said, yeah, they came back with something, but there's no real sort of information, and call me in the morning and we'll work it out in the morning. Like, how good was I at lying to you and convincing you that was the case?
Very good, because I had no idea that it was anything. And as far as I knew, you were just waiting for those doctors in emergency, because it's usually, such a long wait. So to me, it seemed normal. It seemed okay, what you were telling me. So for me, it was comfortable enough to have my evening at home, go to bed, wake up in the morning. And I think John, our youngest, had his swimming lesson that morning, which was close to the hospital where you were. And it was not until, that's right, you sent me a message in the morning. You said, I'll bring my laptop, bring a notepad, work stuff that you needed. Can you swing by the hospital and drop it off? To me, that was all, well, okay, he's fine. He wants all his work here. So I remember dropping off John at the pools and then coming to you. And as soon as I found where you were, it came to you, and then you dropped the bombshell to me. And it wasn't as normal as I thought it would be. I just saw my life change in a moment. And we had no real answers at that point. It was just, they gave you 3 scenarios, and it was one of those, like, what did they say? It was like a tumor in the brain. Either it was malignant or it was not, or they said, or it was that, or a carcinoma at that time. But they could not tell because of the blood that was covering it, and because the MRI cannot go see through the blood, and they couldn't actually see the cause of these bleeds. So we had no real idea what we were dealing with. So that news I was not expecting. I truly believed you when you said, "Oh, it's nothing, it's my back." But I guess that's why we don't ignore these symptoms in life. You go to the hospital.
Am I ever going to be able to say a lie like that again and be believed?
Probably not. You could say it, but I think I might need to follow you this time to the hospital.
Yeah.
I think I did each other subsequent time.
So what you're saying is honesty is the best policy.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll remember that. There won't be a next time, but I'll remember that just in case there is. So was I any good at telling you the news, dropping the news and not creating concern? Because as your husband and then somebody who's had bad news, I got emotional about it as well that night, and then the next morning and the rest of it. Like, was I any good at calming you and giving you a sense of everything will be okay? Because I thought I was.
You were. You actually were your usual self, where, don't worry unless there's something to actually worry about. We knew there was a bleed, we knew that, but it was under control. You were in a safe environment, you were in a hospital, so that made me feel secure. And I suppose your reassuring words of, we actually don't know what it is that we're dealing with, so until we know, we'll worry about it then. So I think I had no choice really but to actually take that advice on board. When I think back to that time in life, I was at that moment when I thought my whole world was falling apart, I also knew that what happened in that moment, in that room, I had to let it stay there, because I also knew I had to leave you and then go pick up John from the pool and be normal, and not to create angst and fear to a young child.
And John was young. John was 12.
John was young, that's right. So I had to leave and just really take your words on board that we have nothing to worry about until we actually know what it is we're dealing with. And I had to believe that so that I can then go and be a mum, go and drive wherever it was and pick up my child, feed them, come back to the hospital, and then deal with what was happening with you. And you were fine in the sense that you were talking, you were conscious, everything, you seemed completely normal, other than this numb foot that progressed by that stage to, I think, to your arm at that stage.
Oh, left side, yeah.
Other than that, which is really not normal if you come to think of it, but you were fine. You were talking, you were eating, you were your usual crazy self. So to me, there was comfort at that point in time.
Yeah. And then you had to ring my parents and tell them to come and, oh yeah, by the way, Bill's not doing too well. Like, how did that go?
Mm-hmm. Oh, without actually setting alarm bells, that was a bit difficult. But I think we did it together, and they spoke to you and they heard you. So I think they were fine about it, in the sense they came to the hospital, they saw you, but look, they were concerned. And it was not an easy thing to watch parents look at their son and wonder what is going on with him. But I felt better that it was shared, that it wasn't just between you and I felt that they had to know, obviously. You're their child.
Yeah. And then the week progressed, and you kept coming to the hospital, and then that was pretty cool because I was up on my feet, I was out and about, I was running the show, the doctors and nurses were always looking for me, and they were wondering, where the heck is this guy? He's supposed to be lying down. Did that give you guys a false sense of security? Because we had no idea. We're only 7 days in. We had no idea what was to come.
No.
Did it give you a false sense of security?
It did, because I remember you said the nurses and doctors were looking for you, and you were downstairs at the cafeteria in the hospital. And I remember coming up at your room to visit you at some stage, and of course you were nowhere near the bed, were you? And I went to one of the nurses. I said, "Oh, is Bill somewhere? Do you know where he is?" They said, "No, he's missing as per usual." Like, it was normal. And they said, "Try the cafeteria," and sure enough, you were in the cafeteria. I think every day, almost every day that I had come to see you, you were either downstairs, you were walking around the ward, you were just not in that bed. So yes, you were normal as far as I was concerned. You were normal, you know. You were annoyed when they kept postponing your angiogram, you know, because they had fasted you all day, then there was an emergency. And then they said it's cancelled for the day. You had to have it the following day. And I remember you were very annoyed because you were downstairs, again, the foyer of the hospital, wanting to eat something. So there were some funny moments, I must say, but yeah, which set this false sense of security that everything's fine, you know, nothing's actually wrong. There was a bleed, it's a funny thing that happened, you'll be fine. And whether I forced myself to believe that, but I felt the proof was there in how you were behaving and acting normal.
Yeah. And then as the hospital stay ended, I came home. What was it like sleeping next to me during that time when I was on dexamethasone and couldn't sleep and couldn't do anything? Like that drug was designed to help me with the inflammation in the brain to save brain cells, but it had a whole heap of side effects, and one of them was hallucinations. What was that like?
That was pretty frightening. I remember one night that I can feel you moving around, and then all of a sudden you just sat upright, just staring ahead of you. And I was asking you, "Bill, what is it? What is it?" And you would not respond. You just kept looking ahead. That was pretty scary. I'm thinking, "Oh my God, he's possessed. What's going on with him?" But I did realize it was the effects of the drug, and I believe it has a whole range of side effects, and you probably had 80% of them. I mean, every single thing that could have possibly been a side effect, I felt you experienced at some way or another. The eating, the grumpiness.
The grumpiness. So tell me about the grumpiness, because there was some really serious grumpy situations, right? So we'll talk about that, because really what I want to do is capture the carer's perspective, right? And we're a regular couple. We argue, we fight, we yell at each other, we scream at each other, and then we're nice, we're lovely, we're caring, we're loving. We do all those things. We're kind of a little bit, all over the place sometimes, but there's usually underlying things that are going on that cause us to act out and misbehave. And then I'm getting really better at misbehaving less and apologizing more is my aim in life. And you're getting better as well at knowing what is something that you need to get cranky about and something that you don't need to get cranky about, what you can ignore when I'm being silly, and then what you can take seriously. And then there was this situation where, do you maybe want to tell the story? Because I've told it from my perspective a couple of times, but remember that time when I was weighing myself and noticed that I'd put on like 8 kilos in the space of a couple of weeks, and I wanted some ice cream.
Yes. Okay, well, I did. I thought we had no ice cream in the house at that time, so I went off to the supermarket to get some ice cream for you. And me being me, thinking, okay, he's putting on a fair amount of weight, let's go get him. a diet ice cream. It's the same, vanilla brand that we would normally get, but I found the light version. I thought, same thing. He won't notice, but it'll be a lot less calories. It'll be better for him. Wow. I think that was the biggest mistake I ever made, because when you actually saw the light ice cream, you did go, I don't know, you were very upset, to put it very mildly.
Feral.
Yeah. And it was, it was not violent or anything. You were just very annoyed. How dare I buy you diet ice cream? Why would I do such a thing? And I just realized at that point, okay, this is not an argument for me to have with you, because I realized I made the biggest mistake ever. I think I just confirmed to you that you were putting on weight when I would normally just buy you the normal regular ice cream, but I went and thought I was doing you the biggest favor, but it was not. It was the worst thing I could have done. I should have just bought you what you would normally have. It would have affected you, if I think about it, on so many other levels, that things were changing, and this was just another thing that I threw at you and gave you a diet ice cream. And you were upset, and it wasn't anger. I think you were just truly upset that I would not get you what you wanted.
Yeah, it was. I think me reflecting on it was that you made a decision without consulting me, and especially about ice cream. And I don't know why ice cream became the most important thing in my world at the time, but it did. And when I didn't realize it was light necessarily at the beginning. I think maybe I read it on the package, but then when I tasted it, it didn't taste nice. And then I thought, oh my God, this is disgusting. I'm not even going to eat it. So I had worked myself up to eat it, and then I couldn't eat it because it was disgusting. So I thought, nah, stuff it. I'm going to just get upset with her and yell and make the point that I don't want you to ever do that again. Make sure next time when I say, get me my stuff, you get me my regular stuff, and there's no you making decisions for me, And I don't know what really made that happen to the extent that I did, but you thought at the beginning, you thought I was joking. You thought I was kidding.
I thought it was, because I thought it was such an odd thing to go to just get so upset about. So I thought there was an element. I think, first of all, I wasn't with you, to be honest, to going back to that time. You must have gone to the fridge when I wasn't home, and it began with the text message. I looked at it and laughed. I thought, he's joking with me. So yes, that's right. I thought it was actually a joke to begin with, until I actually came home and saw you and realized this is no joke. He's angry. He's upset. And, I had to think, I would normally, say, get over it, or what's your problems? Just ice cream, eat it, or don't eat it at all. But I knew not to go down that path. I actually knew that this is not right. That behavior was not normal, I thought. So I let it go. I just took it on board. I thought, okay, I'll get you the proper ice cream next time, and left it at that. And I thought, okay, let's not do that again.
Yeah, I know. You poor thing.
If you've had a stroke and are in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind, like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously because you've never had a stroke before, you probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So let's move forward a little bit, right? To that time when, well, we came home after 7 days. I came home after 7 days. The prognosis was pretty good. The angiogram showed that there wasn't going to be, the bleeding had stopped. The angiogram kind of revealed that this thing was probably going to pass. It wasn't going to bleed again. And in 6 weeks, we had the follow-up appointment. And just before that follow-up appointment, I'm pretty sure it was 1 or 2 days beforehand, I got bored and went to work.
Correct.
And on the way, and while I was at work, I wasn't working, but I was watching my employees work, painting away and all that kind of stuff. And then I started to feel dizzy and like I needed to throw up. And I realized that something was going wrong. And eventually I convinced one of the guys to pack up what it was that they were doing and bring me home because I hadn't driven, because I wasn't allowed to drive. And they brought me home. And on the way home, I called you and said, hey, I'm not feeling too well. I'm on the way home. Can you be home and be ready to take me to the hospital?
Yeah.
So what's it like to receive that phone call?
Well, I remember that day was a Friday night. So it was on a Friday that you went, and it was actually the Monday that you were going to have the appointment. So to get that phone call, it was like, here we go again. But then I thought, hold on, it could just, because you said you felt nauseous. So I was sort of thinking, well, maybe he's got a stomach bug. You know, he was out there, maybe he got something, ate something. The symptoms were completely different from the first incident where you just experienced numbness and no actual, feeling sick or having a headache as such. But this time was different. But again, the concern and alarm bell set off. So I remember waiting for you. I got in the car and waited for you to be dropped off, not to waste any time, I suppose. And I saw you get out of the van, your co-worker's van, and I saw you walking across to the car, and you were as white as a ghost. You just looked so pale and you weren't right. Anyway, you came in the car and you said, we'll just go straight to the hospital. So we were driving there and you were nauseous and you kept saying that you felt like throwing up. Luckily, the hospital was about 10 minutes away and it was Friday. We managed to get there at a reasonable time. And I remember, because you just looked like, in that short time, you looked like you were just getting worse. You were not feeling well. So I drove you all the way to the front door of emergency. And I said, Bill, just go in rather than waste time me looking for a car space to leave the car and then try to walk you in. I thought it's best to just drop you off. So I would say by the time you walked into the doors of emergency, by the time I found a car space to leave the car and get back, 10 minutes maybe had lapsed. I remember going to triage where the emergency desk is, and I said that I just dropped my husband off about 10 minutes ago, and she asked, what's his name? And I said, well, it's Bill. And she said, okay, go straight through the doors. He's on bed, can't remember the bed number, and went straight there. So I thought, oh, that was quick. He got in there, right away. Usually there's such a long wait to get through those doors. So I went in and you were lying down. I remember there was a nurse there, attaching things on you, getting you all ready. So you were not well. You had just, I think, you just went downhill very quickly and you weren't really responsive to me, even though I came to you and there seemed to be, like, you realized that there was someone else in that room. You weren't right. And I just had that sinking feeling in my gut that I knew this was not just a stomach bug because of the way that you were responding, or not responding really. And I remember at that time, the nurse, after she attached whatever she was doing to you, put the blood pressure cuff on you, and then she asked you, she goes, Bill, can you please touch your chin? And you looked at her and then looked at me and you said, who is Chin?
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And I looked at the nurse, and the nurse just ran out of the room. And here was I, left alone with you, a person who did not know what a chin was. And I thought, oh my God. And I went close to you. I remember coming close to your face and I said, Bill, no, where is your chin? Where is your chin? And you looked at me so blankly and you said, who are you? And it was the most devastating moment because I thought, how could he not know who I was? And I remember I just looked at you and I thought, oh my God, there is something seriously wrong here. I ran out of that cubicle to look for this nurse who just abandoned me with this person who didn't know who his chin was or what his chin was. And sure enough, she was running back with the doctor. So she ran off to get the doctor because I think she realized at that point that you were not in a good place, that there was something seriously wrong with you. So the doctor, they came running and they said, we need to take him to CT. So in the process, it was just mayhem. You know, they're pushing your bed out to, you know, take you straight to CT. And I said to the nurse, he doesn't know who I am. And she said, it's okay. We're going to get a CAT scan of his brain. We'll see what is going on. And I remember they're willing you, and I had to be locked out the room, of course, and just waiting for those moments just to find out. And I remember the doctor opened the door, he came to me and he said, there's another bleed, and it's actually bleeding at the moment, but they said that it was a slow leak, but it was a fresh one. So here we go again. And I was thinking, but it was never meant to happen again. They said it was rare to happen again. But sure enough, these rare things tend to happen. And it was bleeding again. And that was the beginning of the journey, part 2.
It was definitely chapter 2, wasn't it? And for
Yeah.
me, my version of that is I remember walking to the triage nurse and that's it. And everything else that you tell me, it's like they're memories, but they're not really. I don't really remember being in that situation. I was out of it. And I think the only reason why I kind of tell people what may have happened is because I've heard it from you a number of times now. But then I was in hospital for 3 days, and I only remember a very small amount of those next 3 days. What was that like? What was it like when I was in hospital in that next 3-day period?
Well, to me, this incident felt like the most serious one because we knew it was another bleed. So we realized it was another level of seriousness because it was something that was not supposed to happen a second time. And this just showed that whatever was there in your brain was quite volatile. It had its own little plan in place, I guess you could say. In that time, I remember that evening, and I suppose this is the moment where I realized it was going to maybe get out of hand, was while after you had your CT, they brought you back, they put some drugs into you. I think they gave you a whole lot of anti-nausea because you kept throwing up. And I'm not very good with people throwing up. I mean,
You're the worst with people
I am
throwing
the
up.
worst. And I remember the nurse had given me one of those bags so that I can help you. I did my duty. I helped you out. But I remember you were dry reaching, and I swear I felt that I needed a bag for myself because I was reaching along. So I could think back and laugh at it now, but it would have looked pretty funny, I'm pretty sure, if anyone else was watching. And soon after that, I remember a lady came into the room and she had this clipboard with forms. And I remember she went to one of the last pages and gave me a pen and she said, you need to sign here. And to this day, I didn't even read it, but she made me sign it. So I signed the paperwork and she said, this is in case he needs emergency surgery. So they were preparing for all of that while they're trying to get in contact with the neurosurgeon that you were supposed to see for the follow-up appointment and all of that. So they were trying to work out what, I guess, get all the paperwork and all plans in place for, I suppose, the possibility of having to open up your stuff that night. And I remember signing those documents and leaving, and I said, I just signed these documents. I didn't even read them properly. And I'm a person that I need to read, but under those circumstances, I was forced into it. And I was hoping, oh my God, I hope he does not need surgery. Not now, I didn't feel, I don't know, I just didn't feel like it was the right thing that I did, signing them. I don't know why. That's how I felt at the time. But that night they found you a bed in the special units. It was high dependency unit. And I remember I was there till it was late at night by that stage. And I remember the nurse said, he's resting easy. And by that stage, you were communicating with me. You remembered who I was again. So I think after all the drugs, whatever they had given you had calmed you down, maybe even helped your brain. I'm not sure if they gave you any anti-inflammatories at the time. I'm not too sure about that. But you did start to recognize and you were talking more. So again, when the nurse said, go home and rest, we're here with him all night. We've got your number. If anything happens, we'll call you. So I sort of felt, all right, okay, I'll leave him, because I had to go collect the boys from your parents because they picked them up from home that evening. So I remember leaving the hospital and just feeling, I didn't know. To be honest, when I think back, I don't know, I'm not too sure what I was feeling or thinking. I just thought it was, I don't know, an uneasiness. I thought, here we go again. But this one did not feel the same. It did not feel the same as the first one. The first time, I think I was more optimistic. This time round, I actually did not feel optimistic because of the fact that you didn't recognize me. And I thought in those moments that's it, I had lost you. I lost you. It was the same. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know your chin. I thought, can this just keep happening? When will this remain that way?
Yeah. To make you feel better, I was really good. I wasn't concerned or worried about anything.
No.
And that's one of the things that a lot of stroke survivors talk about. Like, you're in another world. You're spaced out. There's no fear or concern or worry or anything like that. So that comes later. That seems to set in later. Remember, I'm going to just track back a little bit. Remember when we told my parents I was in hospital and they got ready to come and see me the first time?
Yes.
And remember what happened to my dad?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes, I do remember what happened to your dad. There was about 2 days after you being in the hospital, you were upstairs in the ward, and they were supposed to come and visit later in that afternoon, but I think it was your brother had called and said, oh, they've taken Dad to the hospital because he fainted or he collapsed at home. I could not believe it. But anyway, they had brought him to the same hospital in emergency. And we had you on one level in the ward, and then we had, your dad downstairs in emergency. And it was like, you're kidding me. And I think we had taken you downstairs to see you.
I went for a walk. I went to find him in emergency. And I said to him, what the hell are you doing in here? And he looked at me and he was so upset. And I remember him telling me, you need me for the first time in your life, really serious stuff. And look at me. I can't even be on my feet. Now, Dad was in his early 70s by then, or late 60s. And he was on some blood pressure medication, and he was due to eat, and he hadn't eaten or something. And that made him dizzy, and he fainted and he fell in the backyard. Now, Dad weighs 150 kilos. That's probably double what I weigh. And my mum couldn't lift him, so they had to bring an ambulance to the house to bring him to hospital.
Yeah. So that was a bit shocking because, look, after they did all the tests on him, it just so happened to be the fact that he had no food. It was, from my memory, was a hot day as well. So those two things. So he had a bit of a fainting spell, but couldn't get himself back up again. And I guess that was the most concerning thing. You know, his blood pressure was probably all over the place.
Yeah.
But it all turned out well for him. He was discharged later on that evening, if I remember correctly. But it all worked out well for him. So I think it was more of a lesson. He had to look after himself, and not. He was so stressed and worried about you that I think he forgot to eat and do all the right things for himself. And that's what happened. So
imagine being my mum. Like at the time, imagine being my mum.
Yeah.
You know, and you've been there because we're going to get to that in a minute, right? And then what was it like? Because I started to go on this, I took the approach. So I remember coming out of hospital that second time and then being a little bit fuzzy about my memory. I wasn't able to concentrate, type. Fatigue had kicked in. I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do all those things. What was it like for you to experience me being in that situation?
Well, so yeah, you did become pretty dependent for you to, well, whether it was really not a choice, you know, that was taken away from you, really. So it was just having to do more things for you. You know, if you wanted to go somewhere, I will take you there. If it wasn't me, it was your dad that would take you if you needed things. You know, your appointments, I took you to most of them, if not all of them. Yeah, you had to give up going to work. So that was a big one. That was actually quite hard to watch that, because that was taking away all, just even the basic driving, you know, just driving from here to there to get milk if we needed in the house. You couldn't do that because it wasn't safe to do that. And I remember the frustration in you, you know, as the time went by, that you just wanted to drive. And I think that's where you had enough of the hospital that we went to initially, because you weren't getting your answers. And I think a lot of it was driven by your lack of, or having your independence taken away from you. And you wanted answers. You wanted to drive again. You wanted to go back to work. You wanted, I suppose, life to be normal again. And that was really it was all at a standstill. So it was hard to watch you go through that. To watch you go through it, but I can't actually imagine what it was that you actually felt, you know, at that time, you know, how difficult it would have actually been.
Yeah, stroke survivors talk about it as being really a difficult time, because you become reliant on other people, and when you've been independent, you don't want to rely on other people. On reflection, I think it's good to be able to rely on people and ask for help, but at the time you're mourning your old life, and people are telling you this might be your new life forever, and we haven't adapted our identity to be this new version of ourselves. We are, our identity is still the one that was before the bleed in the brain, before the stroke, what we were able to do, what we were able to participate in, how we worked. We form our identities around, I am, for example, that was a painting business of mine. I was a painter. I went out and I did these things and those things, and I was a dad, and I went to sports and I did all those things with my kids, and I had all these ideas of what I am based around the things that I could do. Now that I couldn't do them, who was I? What type of person was I? And a lot of stroke survivors struggle with that transition, and it's fair enough, because you've got to give up a lot if you become, you know, severely incapacitated. If you can't do stuff, you've got to give up so much, and it's not gradual. You can't give it up slowly and then feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting used to this new me. Just, it's immediate, and then
that's right.
How the heck are you going to deal with that? So that was one of the challenges. Now, part of me wanting answers, then I started doing the research. It was started to, what can I do to support myself, to heal my own brain? And I found that the best way to do that, and this is what I coach a lot of people about now, is take control of the things that they can. And one of the things that I did that I really got a lot out of was, I think my mindset was pretty cool because I'd done a lot of counseling and coaching work up until that time, just because that was the kind of
Yeah.
guy I was.
Mm-hmm.
But then I took diet was my thing. I became obsessed about what went into my mouth, and I started to notice some really, really cool results. Observing that from your perspective, your husband going from this place of not being able to do too much after that second incident to being able to take a lot of control back. What was that like?
That was really good to see. So you were learning a lot. You got onto the internet. You would read anything that, and try and find information, about stopping the consumption of sugar was a big one. Doing things that were like cutting out gluten, and you became pretty obsessed with that to the point where you would, maybe drill those sort of things to me. And I love my sweets, so that was a bit hard.
Sugar and gluten.
But anyway,
what a thoughtful man I am.
I know. But it worked for you. You seemed to become a lot clearer. And I guess it did help you on a physical level, because after that second incident, I guess you were having your your checkups were pretty often after you had changed doctors and everything. But you had cut out all of those nasty things, and you had lost quite a bit of weight, and you seemed more clearer about everything that you were doing, and pretty determined on getting yourself fitter and better and stronger. And I guess it gave you a sense of purpose. You found something that made you feel better. And I guess that, you weren't as foggy in the brain, because you would say at the beginning that you would try and type up an email and you'll be staring at the screen for so long and maybe type 2 words or something like that. So you all of a sudden were able to start doing things that you weren't able to. So I noticed a lot of that sort of thing. And I guess, I don't know whether it was focusing on something that was actually working for you that gave you more of, I guess, the passion to follow through with it, because you found something that was working for you.
Yeah. You know what I found? I found something that nobody else told me about. No doctors, no physiotherapists. And I think it was very early in the technology, in the discussion, in the papers that were available of the gut-brain axis and the connection between a healthy gut and a healthy brain and how to influence the healthy brain. And I thought, well, like in the past, I would have had to go to a neurologist and give my life to them and tell them to tell me what I needed to do. Right now, I can go to the neurologist for the doctory stuff, but for that other stuff, I can do it on my own, and I can prepare my brain so that it gets better and better and better as long as I can, And basically that's what it was. And the diet was something that I was really able to give up foods that I was addicted to be honest. I think I used to drink a can of Coke, mate, almost every single day, and sometimes more than one, and sometimes more than two. And that was my go-to for everything. And then so was bread. Bread was 90% of my diet, instead of, like putting one piece of salad in there and one piece of, cold meat and one piece of cheese wasn't really nutritious for me. It was just bread, layers of bread over bread over bread. And when I got rid of that stuff, I felt like I was lighter, less bloated. My clarity came back, and I discovered that what I was doing, which I didn't understand at the beginning, was actually healing my gut, and that was helping to heal my brain. And then that was pumping me with all those neurotransmitters, the endorphins and dopamine and serotonin. And that was really helping my brain and my mindset to become one of, man, let's get focused on what I can do to impact my life. And I was also a little bit worried about the fact that I had maybe intervened in a way to make myself unwell, because I used to smoke from time to time, more often than not. Like I used to smoke more than 1 or 2 cigarettes a day when I felt like it. Uh, I I used to go to the gym, but not really to get fitter, to make muscles so I can feel like I was a muscle man, so you could love me more, um, and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't really ever about. I didn't really understand what health and well-being was. I thought that it was something that you get when you buy a program from somebody who's trying to sell you their service, and that's about it, right? And I get it. Some of those programs are a great way for people to start getting curious about what health and well-being is for them, and there's a place for them. But for me, it was very superficial. It wasn't
Mm.
There wasn't a lot of detail or depth about it. And then I started to lose weight and thought, this is the first time ever I've lost weight without needing to go to a gym and exercise and pay for a membership. And then it became my mantra: just don't eat gluten, don't eat sugar,
Mm.
and that's 90% of the job done. The rest of it
Yeah.
is eat heaps more veggies, heaps more fresh food, and less processed food, and then eat protein.
Yeah.
And it was simple to do, simple to follow, and it just made the world of difference. And it's basically how I eat now.
Mm.
And I always talk to other stroke survivors on the podcast and say something along the lines of, like, I'm healthier than I've ever been,
Yeah.
even though I'm living with all these symptoms of stroke.
Yeah.
These left side numbness and the burning sensation that I feel on my skin, and then when I get tired, when I get wonky and can't walk, like exactly 100% well, I start to feel a little bit wonky, right? So what kind of conversations were you having with the boys, though? Because I don't remember having too many of them. Maybe they avoided it, but were you having convos with them?
Um, we did. It was mostly, look, to be honest, I think I spent most of my time protecting them, in the sense of not really saying anything that may scare them. But of course, I would let them know that if you were that incident, the second incident, when I went to pick up the boys from your mother's house that evening after you didn't know who I was, by the time I reached your mum's house, I tried so hard before going in to get the kids to be normal, not look upset or phased. Anyway, I sat down and I said hello. And of course, your mum was sitting there with the boys, and she looked at me, she said, "Oh, so how's Bill doing?" And instead of what I may have rehearsed in my mind, how to approach it and say, "Oh, yeah, he's fine, he's resting," I looked at, just burst out crying and said, "He didn't know who I was." Well, if there was any way I could have killed my mother-in-law, that would have been the way to do it. I saw the devastation in her face, and not to mention the boys, because they were in there. I was so caught up in my own emotion, fear that I had felt, even though I was trying so hard to calm myself down before I go into the house. It didn't work. It just didn't work. And all I remember is your dad got up from the kitchen table and walked out of the room. I thought, "Oh, okay." But then I just realized, okay, I've got to change this. I said, "But he's fine. He remembered me afterwards," tried to make them feel better. But it was just all that fear that I felt, that my own devastation. And then I looked at the kids that had their eyes were so open wide, horrified, basically. So I think from that point, I made myself be very careful what I said in front of them and how I approached them, because of my own fears, I think I devastated the whole lot of them. And at the time, maybe I needed it was my own release, but I spent that night telling them, I did say sorry while we were driving home. I didn't mean to, say it like that. But Dad is a lot better now. He was talking to me before I left, and he knew who I was. So that was okay. And I believe the next day I brought them there. They saw you. You recognise them, luckily. and it was okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had, look, they were young, and you know what? Even though whatever we said to help them feel comfortable or not worry about it, and only tell them things if you weren't coming home because you were in hospital, need to explain that, and they were fine about it. But I do believe to this day that they have, the emotional baggage because of it.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
they still they go to counseling, and they've been to counseling. They've got the emotional baggage because of it, because so much other stuff happened during that time, right? And you became my spokeswoman. Like, you had to answer you had to speak on my behalf to everybody. My brother, who's probably not the easiest person to talk to about emotional stuff, because he's an emotional guy, but struggles to have the emotional conversation. Or at least back then did more so than he does now. Then you had to tell your parents, you had to tell your sisters. You basically had to become this like my media person. Like,
Oh my God. Yes.
what's
Yeah,
that like?
not nice, actually. Having to drop all these bombshells each time. But But I felt it was better coming from me. Just let them know not to upset or stress you out in having to do it. So I'll just say it, but everything's all right. He'll be all right, and don't worry about it. That was my attitude, sort of thing, because what I found, it was hard enough dealing with my own uncertainty of what was happening, to have to deal with everyone else's worry and stress was also very hard to deal with. And there had to be that disconnect from it so that I could survive. I felt, I would maybe make things sound better when I told other people than what I actually believed myself, just so that I didn't have to deal with their worry, concerns, questions I had no answers for.
Yeah.
So I guess I sort of always had a rosier twist to the story when I was relaying what was happening to others.
Now that I've got you,
Yeah.
now that I've got you on a podcast, and I can ask you questions that I can't ask you in private.
Oh, really?
I want to know, like, you don't do much talking about what's going on in your life, what your problems are, and I'm the forever talker. I talk about everything, right?
Uh-huh.
And would it be accurate to say that I've dragged you to counseling sessions? And
Yes.
and we never had like marriage counseling, but we had just counseling sessions where I would involve a third person so that I can say things that I didn't know how to say to express myself.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that I dragged you to those. What is it about you? And I'm not trying to be facetious or nasty or anything like that, but like, curiously, what is it about you that you can't have those conversations with a third person? Because they're so helpful for me, and I kind of wanted to force you to go, because I thought, if it's useful for me, it's going to be useful for you. So just go and speak to the counselor. Like, how come you couldn't bring yourself to do that and still are reluctant, I feel like, doing that kind of stuff?
Okay. Well, first, let me just elaborate on the point you made that you had to drag me to see a counsellor. Well, yes, for the first one, you probably did. But thereafter, I think I was pretty willing participant, because after the first one, I actually realized, okay, this is not so bad. And I'm getting a better understanding of how you're feeling about things or how you process things. So it is helpful, just to put it out there. So anyone listening who is afraid to go to counselling, to please go. But for me, I'm a person that feels I need to process things in my own mind first. Maybe whether it's to get a good understanding of what it is that's going on, whatever the issue may be, I feel I need to process it on my own. And if I then need further help, then I'm more than willing to reach out for it. So by the time that may happen, my issue's gone, or I've forgotten about it and I move on. So I guess that's how I work. So I do process. I guess internalize a lot. And I guess that's just my way of doing things.
Is it then not accurate of me when I say stuff like that? That puts you at risk of being the kind of person who sweeps things under the carpet, so to speak, and then they catch up with you later on in life? Does therefore you forgetting about it and moving on potentially create that situation where later it's overwhelmed because there's too much stuff that you've forgotten about or haven't dealt with?
I'd say in some instances, yes. I guess it depends what the issue is that you've swept under the carpet. Yes, things do come up and they can bite you on the butt when you least expect them. I guess for that, it depends what the problem is or what the issue is that you ignore.
Yeah.
But as I said, I try to process things in my own way, in my own mind. And I won't say that I'm perfect with everything, because I am not. And things have come up that have come out at a later stage, and I find it difficult to deal with. And it could be because I never dealt with it to begin with.
You're not perfect, as if I'm perfect. I think I'm perfect. Why would you say that you're not?
Oh, no, reality.
Yeah, all right. I'm not perfect either. So our stroke journey has been really, really interesting. And then there's a lot of people involved. We're Greeks, right? So we don't do things on our own. I don't have a stroke on my own. I involve the entire family. My dad collapses. A whole bunch of stuff goes on, and we kind of take all that stuff for granted. And then as life continued to go on, I got to about nearly 3 years. It was just before the 3-year mark from the initial bleed. It was November of 2014 where I had another bleed. And in that time, if I remember correctly, everything had kind of gone back to normal.
Yeah, it did. It did. It almost became a distant memory, what you had gone through.
Yeah. Things started to come back on board. I was back to work. You were back to work, not caring for me at that level.
I started uni, remember? I started my psychology course.
That's right.
It was May of 2014 when I started my course. So it was that year.
Yeah.
Everything. I felt well and secure in our life that I was able to, start doing something that I felt motivated to do. So yes, that was a very big year, 2014. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I remember during that time, though, the one thing that I struggled with was the amount of time that you put into your studies. And you're a great student compared to what I ever was, but that meant that I had to do more around the home. And then I started to notice the fatigue and started to notice some of those issues. And I started to act up a lot. Do you remember that time as like the way that I just described it, that I started to act up and kind of be a little bit more, less?
Maybe, a lot more frustrated with you wanted things, I guess, well organized so that you didn't have to put too much brain power into thinking. Like for you was, what food would you like? So I don't have to think for you. And I'm actually quite easy. Just don't cook me meat. I'm fine. But I was the type of person that once I got onto my computer to start doing my studies, I could have been there all day, and the whole day can pass by and I wouldn't realize that it was dinner time. So yes, you were getting pretty frustrated that I didn't put any thought into certain things, and that was, I suppose, bothering you quite a bit.
Yeah, and you, not only that, you were you were looking after the boys,
Yeah.
you were going to work, you were
Yeah.
studying.
Yeah.
I mean, and you weren't studying until 9 p.m. You were studying until 1 or 2 in the morning, and then you were going to work first thing in the morning.
Mm. Yeah. There was a lot. I did take on a lot. But I guess for me, it was something that I enjoyed. And if you're going to do something, do it right, I guess. Maybe to the point where I was burning myself out. But I loved it. And I felt more productive during the nighttime hours when everyone else was asleep. I was able to get work done. It was incredible.
And it was the perfect distraction because you'd been
Mhm.
through a lot. Now, a few months into that, November 2014, so you started your course in May, June, July, August, September, October, November. About 6 months later, I had another episode. So I was at work and I experienced numbness on my left side, burning sensation on my left side,
Yeah.
like I was in the sun, like I had been sunburnt, drove myself to hospital, rang
Mm.
you and said, "Hey, I'm feeling a little bit weird. I'm on the way to the hospital.
Yeah.
Meet me there at some point." Is that how you
Yeah.
recall?
Yeah. I think at that point you were walking towards emergency
Mm.
and you said, I could tell from your voice that you weren't quite right. That you sounded concerned and that you said, "Oh, I'm thinking that there's something that I'm having another stroke because I feel a funny sensation on my left side again. So I'm just walking to emergency. I just want to talk to you until I get there." And I remember you said, "Oh, I'm at the desk. I heard a lady speak to you and said, I'm going now. Come to the hospital." And I thought, here we go. Take three. So it was in the morning, and I don't even think it was even 9 o'clock. I remember I was having my breakfast on the couch, and on a Monday is my day off. I don't work, so I was leisurely morning having my coffee and breakfast, and I get that call. So it's like, all right, get up, put some clothes on, and go. So I did that, and sure enough, by the time I got there, you had already done your scan and all of that. And when I saw you, you were sitting up there laughing away, I think, with the nurse or the doctor that was in there. So again, it was a different experience the third time around again. So this time you're a lot more alert. You were still with it. You just said you had a burning sensation on your left side, but they did confirm it started bleeding again. And it was just unbelievable. And I remember the doctor, he was looking at your results on the computer, and I said, "Oh," I looked, he goes, "Oh, come and I'll show you where the bleed is." And it was pretty obvious when you saw the imaging that it was back. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting because I'm doing psychology and we just finished the neuropsych, and it was, all the structures of the brain, and it was, here we go, an actual tutorial right there in front of me." I mean, really did not need my own husband's brain there, but anyway, it was just another blow, really, because at that time I thought we had it behind us. I honestly thought that you were fine, that it was almost 3 years, no incident, felt perfectly fine. I mean, wasn't it the day before you went on a bike ride? Well, I'm not even sure how long, but you had a really, yeah. And you were probably at your fittest, strongest time, and then it happened again. So it doesn't discriminate, clearly. It doesn't matter, how good you think you are or you feel, it can happen at any stage.
Yeah. And then you had to tell everybody again, and we went through that whole process again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It
then you
was,
had to tell your mum.
yeah. And that was hard. But again, it was just a normal conversation. And I said, "Oh, Bill's in hospital again because it's bled again." And I remember hearing my mum's voice, and she said, she was saying, "Is he all right?" And I said, "Yes, Mum, but I think this time he has to have surgery." And she said, "I would rather die than have anything happen to him." I said, "Oh, Mum, what are you talking about? He'll be fine." 5 days later, she actually died. She died. And I, you know, it was the hardest thing to have to obviously experience, but obviously had to deal with what was happening with you. I had to deal with the loss. But in a way, I think because I was grieving for my mum, that what was happening with you just felt, almost became, I don't know if numb's the right or appropriate word for it, but it just sedated my feelings towards what was happening with you. It made the impending surgery that was scheduled for 2 weeks later or something like that, as though it wasn't actually happening to us, sort of thing. It felt, it was like a total disconnect. You were there with me throughout the whole journey, and it made it feel that I could cope, believe it or not. Mourning my mum made me feel that I could cope with you and what was happening with you, because I think I didn't put so much effort into thinking or worrying or stressing about you, because not only was I mourning my mum, I all of a sudden became a carer to my dad. So I had to, myself and my 2 sisters had to care for him, and because my mum was his full-time carer. So I had concerns for my dad. So they seemed like the most immediate things. Like, I honestly thought, oh my God, how's my dad going to survive this? How's he going to survive the loss of my mum? So there was all that focus there, dealing with the funeral, dealing with everything that, and it was not until I think after the funeral that I had to actually put some thought towards you. And then, subsequent appointments with you. I remember before the operation, you had to go get a whole lot of assessments done. And it was a few days before the surgery, if I'm not wrong, that it was a whole day thing pretty much. And then you'll find the whole day until we were about to leave and you said, I feel numb. You were complaining your face was numb. And I remember we had finished after a whole day. I took you to the cafeteria. Let's just get a coffee, something to eat, because I don't think we had an opportunity to eat for hours. And then you decide to tell me that, oh, my face is numb. I'm not feeling right.
I couldn't feel my face. My eyes started to play up. I couldn't see my left eye. And I said, maybe we shouldn't go home. And we were on the way home to my parents' house. They had cooked some dinner. And we were going to go there. We had to ring them and tell them we're not coming. And then we're sitting there, and I probably was the first time I actually got scared, because it started to affect my eye and my vision, and it was a little bit more weird. And I was fully conscious. There was no spaced out or any of that stuff.
No.
And it was freakier than anything I had experienced previously. And I remember sitting there, and while we were sitting there, at one point I forgot, while we were waiting to go back through the emergency, back into hospital, because of course, once you've left all those people doing all those tests, that's got nothing to do with admitting people. No. And we went back to emergency, told them what the issue was. They told us to wait. And there was this time where I did forget about your mum's passing, the stroke, all my issues. Do you remember what that was? It was when I sat down next to somebody whose mum had looked at him and said, did you wash your hands after you went to the toilet? And he was touching the chair that I was touching. And all of a sudden, I had forgotten everything, because I think he was an autistic boy and he must have
Yeah.
gone to the toilet and not washed his hands. And it was just, I got up and walked away and I completely forgot about everything. After that, brain surgery was nothing. I was touching the chair that potentially could have had other stuff on it.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was more concerned that you were making it obvious for the kid and didn't want the kid to feel uncomfortable because this man just got up out of nowhere after the mother said what she said. And I thought, oh my
That was one of the funny things that
God,
happened.
it was.
But before that, I was really upset because at your mum's funeral, I had realized that she said that and she had made this most amazing gesture, and then I felt like she actually did sacrifice herself for me. And I thought, my God, that's just the most unbelievable thing. How can you make such a statement and then that coming true? It was far from being flippant. I felt like that she did something for me and I have to repay her. And this is part of what I'm doing every day and living this, stroke recovery journey, and then sharing the knowledge, and then having the podcast and coaching stroke survivors. Like, that is as a result of what everybody has done for me, but most importantly, your mum's sacrificed how I feel about it. So, and I was really upset because I couldn't be a pallbearer. They wouldn't allow me to put myself in a situation where
Yeah.
pressure from lifting
Mm.
anything would potentially make another bleed. So I had to sit that out. So that was a really tough time for me. I know it was a tough time for you, but then we had to go to surgery. We had to prepare for
Mm.
surgery. And
Right.
that was, how many days? Do you remember how many days after your mum's funeral?
It was close to 2 weeks after, about possibly less than that. So it was soon after. It was at least over a week. We'll just say close to 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, within a fortnight.
Yeah.
And then I went into surgery and we went into the pre-op. I was first cab off the rank, so to speak. I was going to be
Yeah.
first surgery for the day.
Yeah.
We had a really cool conversation with Kate Drummond, my neurosurgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And, and she had a whole team there and she was quizzing them on, okay, so where's the entry point? Where are we going to go into this
Yeah.
guy's head from? And I was there, you were there, we were listening. And then the guy that she asked, he said that they were going to go in from one angle and it was the wrong one. He said,
Yeah.
no, you idiot. And she started
Yeah,
to
she yelled. But I'm sure they were just, I don't know. God, I hope she doesn't normally hit her younger doctors, but it was, I don't know whether it was actually done to relax us or make it a bit comical, but all I remember is, oh my God, do they actually know what they're doing? Are they going to do it right? And then I'm thinking, surely not. As if they would. Anyway, we know that they did do it right and they did a wonderful job.
Yeah. Did you
But
find that you had any concerns me going into surgery? So we had just been through your mum's funeral.
yeah,
Did you have any concerns? Was any of that on your mind?
it was. I mean, it was a very busy morning, and obviously being with you, I wasn't going to put any of my fears on you, but all I remember is there was a certain point that I could be with you and then I had to go, obviously. So because it was very early in the morning, because you were one of the first ones there, I think went down to the cafeteria. It was maybe about 7 a.m. or something like that. So I thought I may as well have something to eat. And at that stage, I think I was eating very little. Food was not really something I needed or wanted. But I thought I've got a whole lot of time to kill because they said it would be quite a few hours before I get to see you. So I remember going to get a coffee and some toast and just sitting there eating and, almost fighting my thoughts because I did not want to think about anything. And I mean anything, not my mum, not you. Just wanted a blank mind because I needed to basically survive those hours. And that's what it was. It was survive. So I ate, and I remember just walking around the hospital, and I found a chapel that was in the hospital. It's just the chapel room. I thought, oh, okay, let me just go in there. It just seemed such a relaxing, serene room. There was no one in there, but there were chairs and they had some books in there. I thought, you know what, I might just sit here, some peace and quiet, And I did, and I was there for a bit of time. I picked up a book, I was just reading, and then all of a sudden, I think it was about 9, I think I killed a bit of time. About 9 a.m., some people started coming in, and there were nuns, and they were coming in and they were putting chairs around, setting up the room. And I remember one of them coming up to me. They said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, but we're just setting up for our morning mass." And I thought, "Oh, no, I don't mind. That's fine." And then they invited me to join them. I thought, okay, since I'm in your space, I'll sit in your circle too. So I sat there with them, and they handed out, so I think it was prayers, and they were just started the morning prayer. And I was look, I believe in God, but I can't exactly claim that I'm very religious, But let me tell you, it got me through the morning, being in that space and hearing them, with their prayers. So I guess it's something that they do each morning. I'm not too sure, didn't quite ask. But I remember one of the opening prayers was a prayer for all the patients that are in the hospital, for everyone that works there, and for the surgeons, and to God bless their hands so that each surgery is a success, something along those lines. And I just thought, oh my God, yes, please bless their hands, So I think it went for about half an hour. And I remember at the end, when it all finished, one of the nuns came up to me and she asked me, she goes, "So why are you in here? Why are you here this morning?" And I said that my husband's in surgery at the moment. And I remember she knelt down and got my hands and just started praying for you. And they did give me strength. And I thought, you know what, he'll be all right. And she just said that, that I pray for, that for him, for his healing and for everything to go well. And I just felt like I needed it. And I guess you needed it too. We all needed it. So anyway, then I thought, okay, it was getting closer towards, the surgery to hopefully start winding up. So I went up to the space where the level of the surgery, where the level that you would have been. I found some couches there. There was a waiting area. So I just waited there for some time. I thought the doctor will call soon enough to let me know that it's, that it's finished. So I just sat there. And then those thoughts started coming into my mind. I thought, what if it's not successful? What if he actually doesn't make it? And I never allowed myself to think, and I don't know how that thought managed to get into my brain, but it did. And all I remember was thinking, no way, my mum would not want him there. There's no way. And I had to stop it, whether it's real or not. We all know bad things can still happen. 2 bad things happened already. But I had to, your mind does funny things, whatever it is, to help you get through it. And I just put that thought aside, and I thought they'll contact me soon enough. And actually, it wasn't too much longer when Dr. Leon did call and said that the surgery was a success and that everything went well, and then they were going to send you to recovery, to the high dependency unit, and the nurses will call me when they're ready, to have you there. And I thought, oh my God, he's alive. All right, take one. He's alive. And then that's when I actually felt the relief. And I thought, oh my God.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, waking up, being alive after brain surgery, let me tell you. Having you guys there was nice and all that. And I realized that I had to learn how to walk again. So that was probably a few days later. But in that time, in my recovery, you got finally fed up of all of this thing being about me, and you had to make it about you.
I did.
Yeah. So what happened now, if it's not my dad doing weird stuff to make it about him when I'm unwell, like somebody else has to take my limelight. What happened to you after I woke up from surgery? Was it a couple of days later?
It was a few days later. It was probably about 4 days later. Not right away. I didn't want to take away the limelight from you immediately, just a few days later. What happened? Well, it started off as a normal day, and I believe it was a Sunday. And I came to visit you as per normal. And I remember it was between 12 and 2 is when they wanted the patients to actually rest in the neurology unit. So I thought, oh, I'll just go for a walk. So I went for a walk towards the market. I remember walking it, but it just turned out to be quite a hot day. I wasn't prepared with any water or anything of the sort. And it was probably, 2 hours is the time that you rested for. So I'd say about 2 hours of walking with no water. And I remember towards the end, I thought, oh, my mouth's a bit dry. So I went and got a small bottle of sparkling water that I sculled really quickly and then continued my journey back towards the hospital. And I remember that day you had a friend come to visit you, and we brought you down to the cafeteria so we can sit with your friend. You didn't want to be in the room. You wanted to be where, even with your head open, you thought, let's socialize downstairs in the cafeteria. So we were down there.
In the wheelchair. I got pushed out.
Yes, with the wheelchair. And well, sitting there, you were having a conversation, and all of a sudden I can see the room blacking out. I felt dizzy. And I could feel myself just moving to the side. And I said, Bill, I'm not feeling well. And I remember your friend had some peppermint tea or something in the water, and he just gave me some to drink. And that sort of helped me. And I tried to breathe in and breathe out. And I just felt my heart just palpitating. It was not a pleasant experience. But then it passed. Anyway, we continued. Then we went back up, and I think you had another friend visit you. So while...
Yeah, I think it was Louise. Was it Louise at the time, maybe?
No, it was the girl that did the marathon, the other stroke. Yeah.
Donna Campese, who had a stroke when she was a kid. She was on one of the early podcast episodes, around episode 22 or something, and she had a stroke, and she ran a marathon with foot drop. So she's an amazing girl.
Yeah. So you were talking, and I was just sitting there, and again I started the same sort of feeling a bit dizzy. So that happened, but then I regained because I had some water next to me, so I drank because I felt the water was actually helping me. And then it happened again, and this time you pressed your buzzer to get the nurse. The nurse thought there was something wrong with you, and you said, no, I'm fine, but someone has to help my wife. She keeps fainting. And I thought, and they said, we can't help her here. But I remember this, they sent an orderly or someone with the wheelchair, and they wheeled me down to emergency where, yes, I was taken in.
They ran a whole bunch of tests to work out what was wrong with you. I remember so vividly. And I'm not sure who pushed me down to the area where you were, but I ended up being in your little cubicle where they were looking.
That's right.
And I remember quite vividly, like just looking out the cubicle in the corridor, and then this doctor comes past, Dr. Leon, who was part of the surgical team with me only a few days earlier. He looked at me and he kind of thought, I remember that guy's head, type of thing. And then he looked further around and he saw you laying on the ground, and he goes, what's going on here? And I said to him, I don't know, something's wrong with my wife, she's lying down here. And he was really concerned, and he said, and he asked a few questions to try and work out what was going on. But what you had done was basically neglect yourself, like my dad had done, and you had started to faint because you were low in some
potassium. Yeah. So basically I was dehydrated, as simple as that. But that caused a lot of havoc in me, where my heart rate was extremely high, but they ruled out any heart issues because I was on the ECG. So the test showed that I was very low in potassium. So had my potassium. They gave me food, which I was quite fussy because I said, I don't eat meat, don't bring me meat. So that was a bit funny. And I remember the young doctor, she looked at me and I sort of told her what I was experiencing. I think I almost made her cry when I told her what was happening. And she said, but you've got to make sure you look after yourself. You need to eat and make sure you drink, you know. And then I thought it was, but you don't think. As I said, that's why I keep saying I just had to survive each day. And whichever way, however I could manage it, I did it. Yeah. But then that really scared me because I thought if anything was to happen to me, if I neglected myself and anything happened to me as well, what about the kids?
Yeah, they would have done it tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember my parents coming to visit me that day and then again not finding me and then being brought down to you and then having to explain to them why you were there and that it wasn't really that serious. It was only dehydration, but it's such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I know. It was hard. It was definitely hard. And I remember lying there on the bed and with your mum because your mum wouldn't leave. I'm thinking, but just looking at her face and the worry, and I was trying to say, it's nothing, don't worry about it. But at the time, I wasn't feeling that it was nothing. I just felt that I was losing control of everything. That's what it felt like. And because physically I was losing control, I couldn't even control myself from sitting upright, you know. My body was leaning, you know, to the left. It was insane. You know, all I had to do was make sure I drank some water or had some food, but I didn't even think to do that. Yeah. But I made sure I did after that. That was definitely a lesson.
Yeah. And then I went to rehab. And how were you with the fact that I wasn't going to walk straight away, that I needed to actually learn how to walk again and use my left arm?
You know, honestly, I was grateful you were alive and that you were able to move whatever you could do. But I don't think there was a moment that I didn't believe for a moment that you wouldn't be able to, because I know who you are. You know, you're a pretty determined person. I mean, you couldn't drive and you were angry because you couldn't drive a car when you wanted to. I thought there is no way this guy is not going to walk. Look, he might not be perfect at it, but I was quite certain that you would. You know, I don't think I allowed myself. I was pretty good at stopping those negative thoughts from entering my mind. They may have entered, but I stopped them from continuing.
That's normal.
So I had to, because I think it can become a very dark place if you focus on, if things weren't to work out the way you would have hoped. Yeah. And I literally took one day at a time, you know, and every day you did improve. And to me, that was amazing. That was amazing. Compared to, you know, day one after the surgery when you're hooked up to machines and, you know, really, I guess a lot of it would have been the effects of the drugs that you were not really responding too well, you know. I mean, although you were, but you weren't at your full capacity. So I always thought, all right, it's all the drugs, it's all of that. But yes, you fell out of bed and, you know, when they thought that you would be fine at walking, but you weren't.
Yeah, that was rough. That was me trying to go to the toilet for the first time after surgery and getting out of bed, stepping on my left leg, and then like fresh out of surgery, ending up on my bum on the floor in the ward. Like that was pretty scary for me. You guys weren't in the room. No. But then also in recovery, they did that chest scan and they found a lump in my throat. Do you remember what that was like?
Yes. I thought, honestly, how much more can you possibly throw at us is what I thought. There was more like, it wasn't, they didn't really say it was a lump. It was more you had a deviated windpipe And they ran in and they said, "Can you breathe? Can you swallow?" And I'm thinking, why are they asking him such questions? But they had done a chest scan to make sure you did not have pneumonia or something, that make sure that your lungs were clear. But instead, your lungs were perfectly clear, but they found that your windpipe and I think your esophagus were all deviated because you had that giant goiter that we never knew about. And I remember the doctor said, "Have you never noticed the lump in his throat?" I said, "No, never." It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, you hadn't noticed it, neither had I. There was a lump the size of a golf ball in my throat, and I had never noticed it. And
but it was inwards. It wasn't a goiter that came out. That's why.
Yeah. So that was pretty nuts going through all of that. I finally went home, and let's fast forward. Like, we've been through a lot, but then now it's May of 2020, and there's been there's been 6 years nearly beyond the surgery. November this year will be 6 years beyond surgery, and things are pretty good. I can't complain about anything, and I'm so grateful to have had you, the most amazing, caring, compassionate person that I know, even though I get cranky at you and yell at you, and we do the husband and wife stuff. Like, the truth is that it's a team effort, and I probably could have done it without you, but I don't think I could have done it as well as I had without you, because you took some of those other things that that you made your responsibility and you ran with those, and that meant that I could really focus on my own stuff. And I think I hit the jackpot, when I met you all those years ago, and decided to
I'm glad you recognize that.
Decided to make you an honest lady, and I can't thank you enough. And I love you, and now I'm lost for words.
Well, I love you too, my darling, and I'm glad you're well. Just keep it that way, please. No more dramas.
You too. This has been one of the most amazing episodes. It's so good to interview you and get an insight into what a stroke survivor carer goes through, because it is, just as traumatic, I imagine, as for the carer as it is for the stroke survivor, the patient. And at the same time that I'm going on my crazy journey of illness and being unwell and all that sort of stuff, you're going through all your normal life, as well as the hurt and the challenges of losing your mom and all that kind of stuff, dealing with the children. And you almost have to put a back seat. You have to put everything on your plate away, aside, and just deal with somebody else and be selfless. And I think hopefully stroke survivors will get an appreciation for the carer, the person who's helping them out. And also hopefully carers will get an appreciation for the fact that they're not alone, and that we do think of them, and that we do feel for them, and we want to acknowledge them. And I want to say thank you to you and to them, because it's really not possible for stroke survivors to do everything on their own. So, you did a great job. You still do a great job. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Maybe we can do podcast number 200 together.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Looking forward to it. That would be fun. Thank you for being the most special guest on the podcast. And all the other guests have been amazing, but you're the most specialist.
Thank you. You're pretty special too.
See you in a second.
Bye.
Discover how to support your recovery after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com.